Acer's new Helios 18 has an 18-inch mini LED screen, 4 RAM slots, 3 M.2 storage slots, lots of RGB, and even snap-on mechanical keys. But bigger is not always better. The Helios has some serious issues you need to know about before buying. The Helios has a black finish with a metal lid but plastic interior and plastic bottom panel. Build quality feels decent for a mostly plastic machine. There's not too much flex when pushing down hard, but there's more flex that I'd like in the chassis and hinge when pushing it back too far, so avoid that I guess. But otherwise, the lid feels smooth and sturdy to open, and the screen doesn't wobble when typing. Acer still covers the hinges with a protective plastic, but it's hard to remove as it goes below the area you can reach. There's no groove or anything for opening the lid, but I didn't have any problems opening it. Fingerprints show up easily, but they're easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. 18-inch gaming laptops are naturally going to be large, but the Helios isn't too thick compared to most other 18-inch models we've tested, and it's basically the same as last year's version, despite the new one having room for way more upgrade options. The laptop by itself weighs in at 7.7 pounds or 3.5 kilos, increasing to just over 10 pounds or 4.6 kilos with its 400-watt charger included. It's a little heavier compared to last year's model, but it's on the more average side compared to other 18-inch gaming laptops we've tested. It's still one of the heaviest laptops with its large 400-watt charger included, so you'll be able to skip gym day and carry this around instead. My maxed out configuration has Nvidia's RTX 5090 laptop graphics, Intel's Core Ultra 9 275HX processor, 192 gigs of RAM, and an 18-inch 4K mini LED screen. But it's also available with lower specs with the link below. And if it has a good sale, we'll list it on our gaminglaptop.deals website so you can save money. The chiclet keyboard has per key RGB backlighting, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. Key brightness can be adjusted between 4 levels or turned off with the F11 and F12 shortcuts, and this controls the brightness of all RGB lighting, though on at least one occasion I found it only controlled the keyboard, so not sure if that was a bug. As for RGB lighting, there's the L bar on the front left corner, the lines and logo on the right of the wrist rest, more on the back just above the ports, and we can't forget about the lid logo too. Lighting is controlled through Acer's included Predator Sense software under the Pulsar Lighting tab. There are 16 different effects built in which apply to everything by default, but you can go into the area menu and customize the different zones individually. Milky Way is the rear lighting, Infinite Ring is the front light bar and lines in the wrist rest, while Mag Key is the WASD keys. The Helios 18 features Mag Key 4.0, which means it comes with optional replacement keycaps with mechanical switches for WASD and the arrow keys. There's a key removal tool which is easy to use. Then you just put on your chosen keycap and switch. The mechanical keys have a nice tactile feel, and they have a louder clicky sound, as well as a shorter 0.7mm actuation, which just means the key press triggers with less effort, and it is noticeable. The rest of the keys have 2mm of key travel and feel fine to type on. It feels a bit weird typing if you've got the mech keys on WASD, because there's a mix of keys, but again they're easy to swap, and having the option for gaming is nice. The glass touchpad feels nice and smooth, and has a nice soft feeling click. It worked well and we didn't have any problems with it. Port selection is good, but although the spec sheet says both Type-C ports can be used to charge the laptop with 20V 5A 100W chargers, neither of the ports charged for us with 2 different chargers. All display outputs connect straight to the Nvidia discrete graphics, whether Optimus is on or off. On the one hand, that means you get max performance in games and can run VR on any port, but on the other hand, you might have louder fans and more heat if you're just doing basic tasks that could have been handled by the lower powered integrated graphics. Getting inside requires removing 10 TR6 screws. All all the same length. It was very easy to open with pry tools. I'll leave a link to these ones I use below. Once inside, we've got the battery down the front, 4 memory slots just above in the middle, the installed SSD in the left M.2 storage slot with 2 spare M.2 storage slots on the right, and the Wi-Fi 7 card on the far left next to the SSD. Wi-Fi speed is decent compared to other laptops tested, and faster compared to last year's Helios, despite that having the same Wi-Fi card installed. Speeds from the installed 2TB PCIe Gen 5 SSD were excellent for the reads, but the writes were similar to what we get from slower Gen 4 drives. Speeds from the SD card slot are fine, but my card can do 2 to 3 times the sequential speeds in other laptops with faster slots. The card clicks in and sits most of the way into the laptop, so no chance of accidentally bumping it. My Helios has 4 48GB sticks of DDR5 5600 memory installed for 192GB of total capacity, but the downside of this is it runs a DDR5 4000, which matches what Acer advertises it with. I tried installing a single stick of DDR5 6400, but it only ran at DDR5 4400, so a little better, but according to Intel's spec sheet, one stick should have been able to run at DDR5 4800, which is what happens with Gigabyte's Aorus Master 18, another laptop with 4 memory slots. In fact, based on this, worst case, I'd expect DDR5 4400 to be possible with all 4 sticks in, but we only get 4000, so it would appear that for whatever reason, Acer are limiting the Helios to slower memory speeds than what Intel's memory controller can support. At least it's nice that Acer includes an easy guide so you know which slots to install the memory into first. There are thermal pads in between the memory sticks, and Acer ships it with spares of different thicknesses that you can use for different sticks. All 3 M.2 storage slots can fit drives with chips on both sides, but nothing says whether the spare M.2 slots are PCIe Gen 4 only, or also support 5. The battery isn't screwed in like other laptops, so it comes right out and is held in place by the bottom panel. The upgrade score is quite high, as it's not every day we have a laptop with 4 memory slots and 3 storage slots. Lenovo's Legion 9 is higher as it can fit an extra M.2 drive, while last year's Helios 18 only supported 2 RAM slots and 2 storage drives. There are speakers underneath towards the front on the left and right sides. They sound alright with some bass, but they're not very clear, and they can get very loud. The Latencymon results were good in our 5-minute idle test. It plays this sound by default on boot. Fortunately, you can disable it in software or BIOS, and it also gives you the option to customize the image that shows on the boot screen. The Helios 18 is powered by a 4-cell 99Wh battery. The Predator Sun software lets you enable optimized battery charging, which limits the maximum charge level to 80% to help improve the longevity of the battery, as keeping it at 100% all the time can degrade it. Display Power Saver is on by default, which automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60 Hz when you unplug the charger to save power, and it goes back up when you plug back in. Battery life wasn't great, but that just seems to be the case with most 18-inch gaming laptops tested. It at least lasted longer compared to last year's model, but that had a smaller battery too. Only Lenovo's Legion 9 and Razer's Blade 18 seem to have decent battery life in this test. It lost 38% of its battery charge charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much battery power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison, and it's one of the worst results tested so far, similar to a number of other 18-inch models. So you'll probably want to prioritize hibernating rather than sleep if you won't be using it for a while. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a standard cooler with 2 metal fans and a couple of heat pipes shared between the CPU and GPU. Acer notes the use of liquid metal, but doesn't say if it's CPU or GPU or both. Air comes into the fans through the keyboard and through these holes on the bottom panel. Air gets exhausted out the back from both sides, and from the left and right sides out the back. Acer's Predator Sense software allows us to change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are quiet, balanced, performance, and turbo. Turbo mode overclocks the GPU and you can't disable it. You can use the fan control tab in any mode except for quiet to set the fan to automatic, full speed, or custom to change the fans individually. But there's no fan curve for setting fan speed based on temperatures like other laptops allow. There's a mode switch key above the keyboard on the left, and the software gives you the option of using this to either swap between the different performance modes, or as a shortcut to enable turbo mode. The button's light changes to a different color based on the performance mode that's currently active. The internal temperatures are cool at idle, but it gets quite hot with the combined CPU and GPU stress tests running, which aim to represent a worst-case full-load scenario. The GPU was thermal throttling in performance and turbo modes, while the CPU was running above 100 degrees Celsius. This is much warmer compared to most other 18-inch laptops I've tested, and I was quite surprised given bigger 18-inch machines like this usually have good cooling. Using a basic metal stand was able to lower temps slightly, but the cooling pad I test with, linked below, helped more. That is, until we max it out, and that's because once it knows it's got better cooling, it sacrifices GPU power to pump up the CPU to 125 watts. But under normal conditions, the CPU runs at 95 watts, while the GPU maxes out around 160 to 165 watts. The NVIDIA control panel says the 5090 can run up to 175 watts with dynamic boost, so I'd classify this as a full-powered 5090 laptop GPU. At least clock speeds are good, with all P and E cores above 4 GHz in turbo mode. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use at the screen's 3840 by 2400 resolution. I've got Cyberpunk 2077 at ultra settings at native in purple, and DLSS upscaling on performance in red to boost FPS. We don't have any Type-C results because none of our chargers worked on the laptop, despite the specs saying it supports 20-volt 5-amp chargers. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench when the GPU is idle. Best case, we're seeing just over 140 watts in turbo, but there's diminishing returns at play compared to performance and balanced modes. It's not a great result compared to the rest of the laptops tested. Most of the others with the same 275HX processor are able to score higher, both in single and multi-core performance, even from smaller 16-inch models. This is the lowest single-core result we've seen with the 275HX so far, but I believe Cinebench 2024 is affected more by RAM than previous versions, so this could be a result of the slower DDR5 4000 memory, which is also the slowest memory we've had paired with the 275HX so far. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and run on battery power. It's still one of the lowest 275HX results, but at least the single core score doesn't drop too harshly, like say Razer's Blade 18. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, and the Helios 18 is in line with this and feels cool. It gets warmer with the stress tests running, but the wrist rest and WASD area still feel cool. The middle is certainly warmer now, but not uncomfortable. Stepping up to balanced mode is fairly similar. The center of the keyboard is warm, but not hot, and in most most cases, you won't be resting there while gaming anyway. Performance mode is pretty similar again, as the fans spin faster to compensate for the extra power pumping through the CPU and GPU. The highest turbo mode feels notably cooler, but the fans are also much louder now too. Despite the fans being set to auto, in this workload, the laptop still maxes them out. Despite the high temps inside, the keyboard area didn't heat up too much compared to the other laptops tested. There are cooler and warmer feeling 18-inch laptops. As long as it's not as hot as MSI's Titan, I think we're all good. But low keyboard temps matter less if you need jet engine fans to achieve them. Let's have a listen. The fans get extremely loud in turbo mode. They're the loudest we've tested this year so far, which is honestly kind of embarrassing considering how high the internal temperatures were running. A 70% louder perceived fan noise compared to ASUS's Scar 18 is crazy. Of course, don't forget you can definitely lower fan noise in performance mode. Turbo mode had a perceived fan noise more than twice as loud, which is a huge difference. But turbo mode only gives you an extra 10% FPS with DLSS on compared to performance mode. So performance mode is clearly a much better sweet spot when it comes to not going deaf. The Helios 18 has a mini LED screen just like last year, but it has a higher 3840 by 2400 resolution this year, but a slower 120Hz refresh rate as a compromise. However, you have the option of swapping to 1920 by 1200 240Hz with a reboot for esports games. The screen looks great with high color gamut, good contrast, and excellent brightness. It maxed out at around 700 nits in SDR mode, as per the blue bar, but HDR mode gets brighter, closer to 1000 nits. It's similar to last year's Helios with HDR enabled, but a fair bit brighter in SDR mode. It's similar compared to a number of other 18-inch mini LED panels tested, and these get much brighter compared to OLED, though there aren't any 18-inch OLED panels available yet anyway. I didn't have any backlight bleed, but this will vary between each panel. There is some halo effect or bloom around bright objects due to the mini LED zones, but it didn't seem that obvious. This only happens with the charger connected. When you're running on battery power, the whole screen acts as one zone, meaning there's less contrast. And this is how I tested backlight bleed. Unfortunately, there's no option in software to control this like ASUS laptops have. If I had to guess, the screen uses less power when all zones are lit up, and more power when turning them on and off frequently. LCD overdrive is enabled by default, which makes the screen respond faster. In the 4K 120Hz mode, we're looking at a 6.3 millisecond average grey-to-grey response time, which is a good result for a 120Hz panel, though some of the transitions from dark to light were much slower, likely due to the backlight zones taking longer to reach peak brightness. Average response time lowers slightly to 5.2 milliseconds with the 1080p 240Hz mode, so you can get the screen running faster for esports games if you're willing to reboot. But there are still some significantly slower transitions going from dark to light. Here's how one of them looked on my oscilloscope. Basically, the transition jumps up 3 separate times before hitting max brightness, which is unusual and something we only ever see from mini LED panels. It's just how they work. Anyway, nerding out aside, here's how the screen's response time compares against others. It's similar when compared to other mini LED panels, whether we're running in 4K 120Hz or 1080p 240Hz mode, and this year's 2025 version is quite a bit faster compared to last gen. Total system latency was decent. This is the time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire shows up on screen in Counter-Strike 2. 1080p 240Hz mode is a bit faster, but it doesn't end up much faster compared to last year's Helios 18. I suspect the slower RAM might be hurting it. The Helios has advanced Optimus, so you can swap between Optimus on or off without rebooting to get optimal game performance. But it's a little confusing, as the mux switch has to be set to automatic selection through the Predator Sense software. Setting it to Optimus forces Optimus only without access to advanced Optimus, and I can't imagine why you'd need that option. Otherwise, use of the mux switch requires a reboot, and given that doesn't change which GPU the display ports connect to, you might as well just leave the software set to automatic selection. Then use advanced Optimus through the NVIDIA control panel. G-Sync is only available when Optimus is off, but Adaptive Sync is available from the integrated graphics when Optimus is on. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle. It has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, and this is what it sounds like while typing on the keyboard. Alright, let's see what Acer's most powerful gaming laptop can do in games. We've tested it with these settings. Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p ultra settings ran great as a standalone result, but it's one of the lowest 5090 results we've ever tested, basically matching the 4090 from last gen in Alienware's M18R2, presumably due to the slower DDR5 4000 memory, which is just a trade-off when you go for crazy high capacities like 192 gigs. It's still one of the lowest 5090s at 1440p too, only Razer's much smaller Blade 16 is behind, but at least that's more understandable. At 4K, it's still one of the lower 5090s, but at least the difference isn't as big, and this is much closer to the native resolution of the screen, so you'd be more likely to run games at 4K. Alan Wake 2 was one of the lower 5090s at 1080p too, considering the GPU is able to run at max power with high CPU power levels. It seems like the only explanation for the lower performance is its 192 gigs of memory running at DDR5 4000. Components like RAM and CPU matter less at higher resolutions like 1440p, as the GPU handles more of the work, which is why the Helios is at least now ahead of some of the other 5090s. And at 4K, this time it's actually not too far away from some of the best results we've ever recorded. In Black Myth Wukong, it's back to being one of the lowest 5090s at 1080p high settings. Don't get me wrong, performance is still excellent. It's just that other laptops with the same CPU and GPU typically run a bit better. Same deal at 1440p, still great performance, just not as good compared to other laptops, while other 18-inch machines are able to hit 12% higher average FPS. At 4K, it still seems to be held back a little compared to the bulk of other 5090s, so it would seem the slower memory speeds may still matter depending on the game, as the GPU was a few degrees off thermal throttling in this one, and performance was still pretty decent with a combination of DLSS upscaling and ray tracing. We only test ray tracing with settings that actually visually enhance the game, so these could be worth using if you want some extra eye candy. Or of course, you can forget about RT and still use DLSS by itself to boost FPS even higher. Here are the 3D Mark results. Like the games, most of the content creator tests are on the lower side too. Granted, these benchmarks don't care so much about more RAM, so if you know you need tons of memory capacity, then the Helios will still offer you an edge here, especially when paired with its nice looking mini LED screen and SD card slot. The BIOS looks nice, but there's not much customization available through here that's not already found in software. Considering the potential of a bigger laptop like this, I was hoping to see more tuning options. Linux support was very good. The only thing that didn't work was the mode switch key, which seems to need Windows and Acer's software. Pricing and availability will always change over time, so check the links below the video for updates and current sales. If the Helios has a good sale, you'll find it on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that daily to include the best sales. So make sure you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. At the time of recording in late October, Acer's Helios 18 with RTX 5080 graphics starts from $2,800 US with a sale. Not too bad, but we've had Alienware's 18 Area 51 and Asus's Strix G18 with the same specs on the deal site for $2,550 in the past. Of course, the Helios has extra features like more RAM slots, so it depends if you're willing to pay for those extras. The higher tier 5090 version I've tested, but with only 64 gigs of RAM, isn't on sale at the moment and goes for $4,500 at full price. But we have listed this one on the deal site in the past for $3,500, so $1,000 less than this. It really is worth checking out the deal site so you don't miss out on these kind of discounts. But even with sales, the Helios 18 is not cheap. So is it worth buying? Let's summarize the good and the bad to find out. Starting with the good, there's lots of upgrade options available here. The 4 RAM slots lets you go up to 192 gigs of RAM, plus the 3 M.2 slots should be capable of fitting 8TB SSDs if you're made of money. The 18-inch mini LED screen looks great with high color gamut, high brightness, and decent response time as far as mini LED is concerned. The option of swapping between 4K 120Hz and 1080p 240Hz is a nice bonus for esports gamers, though we didn't find it to help too much. The optional mech keys are a unique feature. I like stuff like this where you can try it out and decide if you want to use it or not, rather than being forced one way or the other. But that's basically all it's got going for it. As for the bad, although the exterior feels cool enough, the internals run hot and thermal throttle under heavy load, something we don't see from most other 18-inch laptops. And that's despite the fans being super loud too, louder compared to most other laptops. But to be fair, you can significantly reduce fan noise and still get decent performance with the lower performance modes. But that's the thing, even in the best performance mode, CPU performance and gaming performance just can't compete with other, sometimes cheaper laptops. Some of this is the compromise of slower DDR5 4000 speeds in order to get 192 gigs of memory capacity, but that part doesn't affect the fans blasting at 60 decibels while thermal throttling. Battery life is low, but that's pretty standard as far as most 18-inch gaming laptops go, and the Type-C ports didn't work for us for charging the laptop. Bottom line, the internals run hot and thermal throttle, the fans are the loudest all year, yet it still underperforms compared to other options with the same CPU and GPU. And this combination prevents me from recommending the Helios, unless you really value the upgrade options, the mini LED screen, or some other unique feature like the swappable mechanical keys. If the upgradability is the main point of interest, then I'd suggest looking at Lenovo's Legion 9 instead. Granted, that is more expensive too. I'm about to compare all 7 18-inch gaming laptops I've tested in 2025, so get subscribed for that. Until then, you can check out the Legion 9 over here next. I'm still yet to make that 18-inch comparison where I'll know for sure, but right now, just based on vibes, if I was buying an 18-inch laptop, it would be the Legion. So I'll see you in that one next.